Chapter 12. Are you ready? Well, I am. We're going to be talking about, first off, consideration. The first question is, what is consideration and what's required to make it legally sufficient? Well, first off, consideration is that thing that binds the parties to an agreement. It could be money, it could be return promise, an act, and so forth. Often consideration is broken down into two parts. It's something of legally sufficient value and it must be bargained for. So let me define each. Legally sufficient may consist of the following. It's a promise to do something that you're not already obligated to do. It could be the performance of an action that's not already obligated to perform. And it could be the refraining from an action that one has a legal right to undertake. And if you think about the refraining from playing the drums 10 at night or refraining from mowing the lawn before 7 in the morning, if those are legal and where you live, that would be an example. A bargain for exchange, the second element of consideration, is what one gives to bind himself to that agreement, and that's going to distinguish it from a promise to make a gift. So if I say I'm going to promise to give my grandchild $1,000 and nothing is required in return, then of course that's a gift and it's not considered consideration. And the last one they talk about under this section is adequacy consideration. In other words, how much, and that's very difficult for the courts to determine, so they basically don't look into adequacy consideration. Whatever the parties agree to, the courts generally say that's what we will enforce. The second objective says, in what circumstances might a promise be enforced despite lack of consideration? Well, the last chapter we referred to this when we talked about promissory estoppel. If a person reasonably and substantially relies on a promise and the other party backs out, the courts may enforce that agreement even though there is no consideration. Let me give you an example. Let's say that I tell my grandson I'm going to give him $3,000 to help him buy a car for school. And then based on that, now think about what happens next. These are the requirements that would be to establish promissory estoppel. First off, there must be a clear and definite promise. Well, I promised to give him $3,000 to buy a car. Remember now, nothing is done in return. I didn't say you need to, quit smoking. If you quit smoking, I will give you $3,000. There's nothing like that. It was just simply I was going to make him a gift. Then the promisor, that was me, should expect that when I make that promise to help him buy the car, that he's going to go buy one. The promisee, that would be my grandson, relies on the promise, and he goes ahead and he buys the car. The promisee's reliance was definite and resulted in a substantial detriment. In other words, let's say he was going to spend $3,000 for a car, and with my $3,000 or whatever I said I was going to give him, he could buy a much safer, bigger, nicer car. So that would be a substantial detriment to him. And then the enforcement of the promise is necessary to avoid injustice. So it wouldn't be fair to him if I backed out. Okay, number 3, does a minor have the capacity to enter into an enforceable contract, and what does it mean to disaffirm? Well, of course, a minor can enter into a contract, assuming the adult will enter into it with him, any agreement that, of course, that is legal. The minor has the right to disaffirm. That means the minor has the right to back out, but the adult does not have this right. Of course, the adult had the right not to enter the contract in the first place, but that's not what we're saying. We're saying, minor enters into a contract with an adult. Generally speaking, the minor will have the right to back out. When he does disaffirm, he must disaffirm the entire contract and not just parts of it, and then return whatever goods he has in his possession, even if these goods are damaged in many cases. The laws vary by state on this, so you'd want to check to see what it is in your state. But if you're an adult, just keep in mind that if you're going to deal with a minor, it's possible that you could sell him a car. He could wreck it and bring back to you the wreck, so depending on what state you're in and so forth, so just be careful. Okay, number 4, under what circumstances will a covenant not to compete be enforced, and when will they not be enforced? Well, you've already viewed a video talking about the non-compete. You remember if the restaurant deal and they found out that the guy wanted to keep his recipes and so forth. Most of you, of course, felt that should have been part of the original agreement by the buyers and so forth. When you buy an existing business, of course, you generally do pay for more than the building and equipment. You're paying for goodwill. That is, you're paying for his customers and his reputation. Goodwill could easily cost you 5 to 10 times or more than just the cost of the building and the equipment. So when you pay this kind of money, you certainly don't want the seller opening up a new business 2 blocks down, within a year. So because what will happen very likely is he will get many of his customers back. You can also find that when you go for a job, depending on what the type of job you have, that you could be faced with signing a non-compete clause. If you're in the position of where you could, rack up a bunch of customers that you could possibly take with you, you could learn company secrets and so forth, it would be silly for that employer not to make you sign an agreement that would prevent you from, taking this information, those customers with you and going down the street and using them to compete against them. Non-compete clauses must be reasonable as to time and geography. For example, my daughter is a dentist and owns a business in this area, and I can guarantee you that when she hires a new associate, she certainly includes a non-compete clause. The clause, of course, couldn't be, we're hired, you agree on pay and so forth. You say, okay, now, if you work and you quit, you can't go someplace else for 10 years in Iowa. Well, the courts obviously would not enforce that because it's not reasonable. So it must be reasonable as to geography and geography and time. So for example, a 3-year, 50-mile radius contract or non-compete clause might be reasonable enough for the courts to enforce it. And finally, they talk about the exculpatory clause and in what circumstances might be enforced and when it would not. This clause releases a party from liability in the event of monetary or physical injury, no matter who's at fault. When you think about skiing and gun range and so forth, these come to mind. In certain situations, the exculpatory clauses may be contrary to public policy and will not be enforced. Your text talks just a little bit about that at the end. So anyway, that's chapter 12. Again, wish you luck. Don't procrastinate. Most of you are doing quite well, and happy to see that you're staying with us. So anyway, good luck with chapter 12, and I'll see you in chapter 13.